Today's fun front wheel bearing, ML350. This is a 2005, but I believe all the MLs, every engine, every year is the same up until 2005. After that, 2006 and later would be a little bit different. Takes quite a while for them to go fully from once you first hear them moaning the tiniest little bit. Even loading it, turning the wheel sharply from side to side and loading up each front wheel one at a time wasn't making much of a difference. Now in the last couple of weeks, I guess the hotter weather, it is. Probably about, again, 3,000–4,000 kilometers since this started to go a little bit. So just if you're wanting to test, see if your wheel bearings are good when you crank from side to side, you're going down a road. Do it on a road where there's nobody else there, so you're not causing any, because you're going to want to turn sharply from left to right so that the car leans, and when it leans, the side that it puts the weight on, if that side makes noise, that's where the wheel bearing noise is coming from. That's the side the wheel bearing's gone on. And when you turn it the other way, if the sound goes away, obviously it's the other side. So when I would turn it sharply to the right, the car leans to the left and then makes the noise in the front, which means it's the front wheel bearing. Anyway, enough chatter. I'm going to take the wheel off, jack stands, and we're going to be pulling the entire front spindle and hub off. Okay, first thing we have to do now that the car is jacked up on jack stands, as usual, wheels shoved under the body of the car, the frame of the car, in case it falls. There's a floating caliper on the ML, so the caliper bracket that on most cars comes apart is actually built into the spindle on the ML, so there's no caliper bracket to take off. You have to take off the caliper itself, which will be hanging up by the suspension to keep it out of the way, maybe jamming it down whatever length we can get to. There's a bunch of things we have to take off before we can take the caliper off. Might as well loosen the disc retaining screw, which is a 5mm Allen headed or hex socket. There's a 10mm bolt right here that holds the ABS sensor and the wheel, the brake wear sensor. The wiring for that, it holds it onto the spindle. That needs to come off. That's a 10mm. I've lubed all of these bolts I'm gonna have to take off prior to that, including upper and lower control arm ball joint bolts, just the ball joint bolts, and the tie rod end. Caliper itself is a T40 Torx. So there's two bolts, top and bottom, that hold the caliper sliders on. Those two will come off, get back in there. And the last one will be for the ABS sensor, the wheel speed sensor. And this is an E10 reverse Torx. This is on a 2005 ML350. And there is a possibility that some cars may have slightly different fasteners. This could be a 10mm on yours. This could be an E10 on yours. But just the difference. So we're going to pull this one off, pull the wheel speed sensor off, pull this one off just so this wiring bracket comes out, unplug this, just use needle nose pliers, unplug the brake pad wear sensor from there, and then the two bolts for the caliper and the rotor retaining bolt, and we'll be back in a minute. And today it's like 103 degrees, so even worse than yesterday. If I whine, I'm sorry, it's freaking hot. So yeah, I'm gonna have to keep the camera in the shade most of the day, because yesterday it was just tripping the heat sensor in the camera and it would just go off at random times. So I have to keep it in the shade most of the day, and hopefully the sun is not following me, because I can't move the car now. Anyway, back in a few minutes. Everything is now off and ready to pull the caliper off. Re-greased the slider pins before I've put it back in. So I let all of the penetrant sit for about an hour, because especially the wheel speed sensor down here, this big hole, those things are really tough to get out. You just have to be gentle and wiggle and pry, and you will get it out. If not, if you can't get that thing out for whatever reason, follow the wire back. It zip ties across the upper control arm and then plugs in up under there. You could probably unplug it under there, take the zip ties off, and pull the whole thing off that way and leave it attached to the spindle and hub. So the brake caliper is ready to pull off, and I've done a video on this before, so if you don't remember exactly how to pull the brake caliper off, my W163 playlist has the caliper and pad removal. On these calipers, once the caliper retaining pins are out, pull out from the bottom. See these two? At the top, you've got the top of the brake pad hooks over top of here, and then this spring that retains the caliper, holds it down, is under there as well. So you can't pull this end up until this bottom end is out. It comes out, and then this slides off. See that spring pop back up, and going back in, you'll go that way and down. So I'm just going to take this caliper and tie it up to the frame up out of my way, and we'll get to the 3 big bolts, which are going to be a pain in the butt, the biggest pain in the butt of doing this whole thing, and remove. So I'll pull the disc off too, but then we'll pull the spindle out. So we'll be back in a second. I'm going to remove the tie rod arm bolt, which is a 22. I just loosened it. I was just checking to see how tight it was, to see if I was going to have to use an impact or anything, but it wasn't tight at all. And you want to use a lot of penetrant on these, and move it back and forth, because as it gets to the top, with all this rust and crap that's on it, if the ball joint, or so the tie rod end, falls out, and then you can't grip the top, once you spin the nut, it's going to be spinning the entire ball joint. Now there is I think it's a 5mm Allen-headed bolt on top, or sorry, it's a 7. It's a 7mm. You can hold that, but most of the times it's a little bit rusted to an in-between size, so it's not extremely helpful. So up here at the top, it gets a little tight. So just working it slowly back and forth. Again, this is a 22mm. And you want this bolt to come all the way off before you detach the tie rod from its socket. Whoa. Sorry, I guess I was trying to murder you. Seafoam Deep Creep is what I usually use, or have been using for the past couple of years, because it's just great stuff. Oops, sorry. So I'm just going to work this back and forth for a few minutes. Once I get the nut off, I'm going to place it on about 2 threads, and then whack this part of the spindle arm with a hammer, and it should pop right out. Back in 2 seconds to do that. Okay, so I've got the nut off. Took about 2 minutes to wind it up and make sure it safely went up and didn't strip. Anyway, I'm going to put it on about 1 or 2 threads, just enough to hold it on there and make sure the tie rod end doesn't fall down. And I'm going to whack this part here with a dead blow hammer. And there we go. Which is why you only want this on 1 or 2 threads, because if it's on a bunch, this will spin. So anyway, off, pull this down. Put that bolt back on. And now we're going to use a 19. Oops, let's move this, sorry. I have to make sure this doesn't stay in the sun too long. I just took a laser temperature reading of my tools to see how hot they were. 135 degrees. Sitting out in the sun, that's the temperature of them. Nice, huh? What do we need now? A 19 for the upper ball joint, I believe. I thought it was a 19. Is this a 19? This is a 19. Yeah, it's a 19. Okay, that's coming off, and we're going to do the same thing. We are going to slowly wind it off, pass through the rust. Which you don't want to watch. And then we're going to do the same thing once we get the nut off, put it on another tooth, and then whack, or one thread, and then whack here, excuse me, and that will separate the upper ball joint. And the last thing we'll have to do is the lower ball joint. And I'm going to get this camera out of the sun before she turns off. Now, never having been one of those videos that just says remove bolt, remove bolt, remove bolt, easy peasy, next step, like a Haynes manual, I actually have always shown when stuff is hard to do. The top ball joint, control arm ball joint, as I was turning the bolt, you can see in the back there, the ball joint came out of the control arm, and I couldn't turn the bolt anymore. There's a 8mm hex nut. It's like a socket. You could put a socket over to it. It's like a nut head. But again, they rust down to a half size, so it's not a 7, it's not an 8, and they're almost useless. They always do it. It's an 8mm bolt. How good is it going to be under suspension after years? So I had to C-clamp the upper control arm to the spindle and put a jack underneath to take the weight off and push it up, and then I could get the bolt off, which is now off. And once I pull the C-clamp out, that upper control arm will stay stuck in its taper. But no, it won't, because I just have to lower the jack, and that will come out. But I'm going to leave the jack partially under there to support the last lower ball joint, so it just doesn't all fall out. So if I just tap on this, that's going to come out if I tap on the arm. Of course it is. Oh, I'll just tap on it a few times once I get it turned over. Again, the jack is keeping the weight from falling and pulling down out of the spindle arm, out of the upper ball joint. Wow, it's freaking hot. Yeah, I'm gonna separate that. I'm gonna do the whack with the ball joint, and then we will remove this center nut, which I believe is 36mm, and then on to the bottom, which will be the last step. I'm gonna step into the garage and have a beer and cool down. Okay, demonstration of how these things are not what everyone on the internet shows you how easy they are. So here's the spring clip. You can see it. It's got the two little holes in it. One hole here and one hole here. And these pinch together and the spring lifts out. Like all the videos on the internet, right? No. Okay, I've got a big pair of needle nose pliers. I'm gonna stick it in the two holes. And these pliers are either gonna break, but you can see the bend. So there's another way we're gonna have to approach this. I've soaked it in penetrant, and I'll be back in a second to show you how you loosen this up. Okay, so I have a needle drift or a punch, whatever you want to call it. And what you have to do is push these one at a time. You're gonna tap them with a hammer together. You want to try and make this whole thing spin, but you can't tap it this way, because that's the way it tightens. When it opens up, it tightens. So you have to tap them inwards. So you have to tap this in and you have to tap that in. So you're gonna tap it each way. Please don't come off this. Just stay where I put you for now. And you'll hear once it's loosened itself. You can hear the difference as opposed to the hard thunking it was before. Now you can hear it being springy. Now we'll come back with the same needle nose pliers and get this sucker off. Okay, so now we're going to take off that center nut, which is 36mm, But I can't find my 36mm socket, but I can find a 1 7/16 SAE socket, which is pretty damn close, within half a millimeter, I think. If you do not have impact tools, before you do any of that, you might have to put your take that nut off once you remove the brake caliper, before you take the suspension off, and then use a pry bar and pry it off. If you're not using air tools, if you're not using impact tools, I mean, this is a 700 foot-pound impact gun, and it will not have a problem with this, so I wasn't worried. Oh. And it does not. And you can see that upper ball joint just popped out. Lifted it up and pulled the spindle out. Now all I have to do is the bottom ball joint nut, which is a 22, and it is right down there. See the big sucker there? But nice for me. I didn't record it because I've already done a video on it. I replaced the lower ball joints on this, I don't know, what, 6 months ago? I did them, but I've already done a video on it on my ML320, which is the exact same, so I didn't bother recording it again. But I replaced the lower ball joints just because I had an extra set in stock and I was bored that day. Yeah, some people drink beer. Some people do other things. I put ball joints in for fun. Anyway, I'm going to loosen, it's a 22, loosen that one with the wrench. I should be able to, actually, if you turn it properly, you should be able to go straight down with a 22mm socket and take that sucker right off. And once we do that, I'm going to pull the jack out from underneath. It's not underneath the brake backing plate, which is what it looks like. It's underneath the lower ball joint, that jack. So I'm going to remove that. I can, like I said, you can use the wrench, you can use the impact. I can use an impact because it's so hot. I do not feel like working. I'm going to take that off, and then we'll take the lower ball joint out, which is going to be another whack, 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 and then the entire thing will slip off, and we'll start from there. I don't think there's any need to show that. If I get in any problems, which I don't foresee with this part, I'll show you, but otherwise it's take the 22mm bolt off the bottom and it slips straight down. And again, the jack is just holding up the entire spindle right now because it weighs like 40 pounds. I don't want it falling on my head. Back in a minute. Pop this camera back in the shade. You just watch me sweat and die from afar. The lower ball joint bolt is off. I just used the impact gun. You can see with the long extension, it took it off in half a second. Those are also a great impact gun if you can find them. It's the Rockwell 20 volts. Rockwell doesn't manufacture anymore, but they were bought out by a company called Works. And Works is essentially making all the old Rockwell tools under license, and so all the battery packs and everything fit. But the nice thing about the Rockwell 20 volts, if you can find them, batteries, tool, everything guaranteed for 20 years. It's a 20-year warranty, and you just phone in and register the warranty when you get them. I've got 4 of them, I think: a drill, an impact drill, the impact gun, and something else. But anyway, they all came with 2 batteries and a charger, and they've been clearing them out everywhere because they're hard to find. They were switching over to the Works brand. But once the Works brand comes in, you don't get the 20-year warranty. But if you get the Rockwells, and on the box it says 20-year battery and tool warranty, they will honor it. And all you have to do is, if a battery dies, you call them up and they send you a new one. I have a few friends that I encouraged to buy those when they were getting blown out last year. But great secondary gun to have. I think they do about 240 foot-pounds. But anyway, let's put this down. I rant a lot, don't I? I'm gonna put this down and pull that spindle off, and hopefully not break myself in any way. But you never know. That's kind of fun, isn't it? I still haven't tapped the axle shaft out of the center bore here. drive shaft is loose, and I should be able to. You can see that where the ball joint is. I'm going to hold it up the spindle with my hand and then whack on the arm. Hopefully that will separate it. Or not. Let's get you out of the way. There we go. And off. Beer time, back in a sec. Okay, you with me so far? I'm not even with me, it's so damn hot. Now I'm gonna tap the spindle out of the center, and then next step is press out the bearing. And I'm just going to rest the arm of the spindle, or sorry, I'm gonna tap the wheel hub out of the center. I'm gonna rest the spindle on this railroad tie and then tap it out with I've got a 33mm socket, so basically you want it to fit. So this center part is the center hub. You don't want anything that's driving against the bearing, so you just want something about as wide as the hub. And I'm just gonna tap on it and it should pop it down. Let's go for should. Will is not necessarily true. By the way, I found my 36mm socket when I found this. It's coming slowly. So you can see it's come out about a millimeter from the center. Oh, I can feel that bearing crunchiness. It's come out about a millimeter. And I'm sure you don't want to watch me tapping on that for 5 minutes till I tap it out. So I'm just gonna tap it out. And I could use my bearing my press. Oh God, should I? I'm trying to show this with as few specialty tools as possible. No, I'm just going to tap it out. Screw it, I'm going to tap it out and bite. As usual, as soon as I turn off the camera, it takes like 3 or 4 more whacks and it's all done. I could have just left it running for another 5 seconds. But anyway, I'll let you see the last couple of whacks. Stay. Whackety whack. Now, unfortunate part is the bearing race right here came out with it. So we're gonna have to use an angle grinder and cut it in 2 or 3 spots, making sure not to go down to the bearing or to the hub. And we're gonna cut that, and then we'll just stick a chisel in there and smack it, and it will split and come right off. Getting it off like this is pretty hard. So yeah, the only way to do is make relief cuts with an angle grinder, straight down, and then opens up like a zipper. Well, not like the zipper, but it opens up. Back in a bit. Okay, so here's the bearing. Sorry, race. Come off, you. And I just cut it so it wouldn't go all the way through. You're gonna, if you do it this way, you're going to get a minor scarring on the hub, but that's not a big deal. I'm just gonna polish that up with some 200 grit and then 600 grit sandpaper and make it nice and smooth anyway, so it'll slide into the new bearing a lot easier. You can use a Dremel tool or a grinder, and this is what the race looks like. So again, excuse my sniffling, my yeah, sweat is running into my eyes. There's a lot of videos out there that are just going to show you take it off, tap it off, it comes right off. It doesn't. 99% of the time, it does not. This is what you face most of the time. 99% of the time, this is what you're faced with. And you got to learn to deal with it. And this is the method of dealing with it. You know, again, someone might look at this video and go, oh my God, I don't have that tool. That tool is going to be 20 bucks for, like, say, a 36mm socket. Or you don't have an angle grinder. It's just 20 bucks. Get a cheap one and they don't matter. Throw a few discs on it. I have 4 or 5. If one burns out, I throw it away. I buy the cheap ones. I'm not buying expensive ones. I'm not working in a machine shop. I don't need to run one all day, every day. But that $20 tool, that's 15 minutes of work for your mechanic. It's 15 minutes that you got to pay him, you know. So saving this job, if you do this job yourself, you're probably going to save yourself $500. But anyway, who cares about that? Let's move on to the next phase, which is going to be pulling out the C-clip, which is fun on these. Let me tell you, I've done them before. You know, not like the rest of the videos, we just grab it with a pair of needle nose pliers and pull it out, but let's have fun and see how bad this one is. Back in a sec. Okay, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to use a smaller set of needle nose pliers. Again, if it comes out the first time for you, you know, God love you, but 99% of the time, that ain't gonna happen. I'm gonna put some safety goggles on because these suckers have a habit of flying. I mean, it's a giant spring. Well, that side's still not loose quite. Okay, I'm gonna get my special tool, my C-clip removal tool, just because it's safer and easier. But you can use vice grips, a bigger pair. But I'll use my C-clip tool because I don't want this thing, I know it's gonna hit me in the head. Hold on a second. Okay, so these are C-clip pliers. They don't do great for stuff that's way down deep, obviously, with the angled snorkel on the end, the angled nose. But it's gonna keep me from wearing this one. You know what I should do it with? If I'm saying you can do it with needle nose, I should do it with needle nose. So, anyway. Taking one for the team. They're just not as easy to get out with needle nose pliers. There we go. Come on. Urgh. I'm just gonna stick a screwdriver up so it doesn't go back down into that channel. There we go. One side popped out. Springy, springy. There she be. So, okay, I used the needle nose. I didn't use the real tool, but again, I recommended that you could use needle nose, so I had to do it. I couldn't exactly not do it. So now all we have left is to push out that bearing. Aren't we happy? Okay, I'm just in the side shop of my garage. I've got a 20-ton press, hydraulic press here. If you don't have a press, you can sit there and hammer these out. I've done it before. It takes a lot of time. I just was getting too old and too tired to continue that crap forever. So I broke down and finally made space for a hydraulic press. I'm going to press the bearing out. I hope I'm going to press the bearing out. I'm just using an old bearing. Always, if you have a hydraulic press, save your old bearings because they're worth their weight in gold for pressing the old one out or hammering the old one out if you have to hammer them. Yeah, that's not going straight. Yeah. But you see what I'm doing. I don't have all of the little different level little chunks of metal to stick under it and allow everything to center up. So I'm just going to have to find chunks of wood and crap and everything else to push this bearing out. But basically, I'm just pressing it out from top to bottom. You press the spring, the side where the spring was, that's where it comes out. That spring keeps it from popping out in that direction. So that's the way you're going to hammer it out, push it out, whatever you're going to do. Take it to a shop and have them press the bearing in. It takes them 5 minutes because they've got everything all set up and ready to go, and they've got a electric hydraulic press. It takes them 2 minutes. If it's actually the quickest, easiest way for you to do it, they'll probably charge you 10 or 15 bucks to do it because it takes them, again, a couple of minutes. It's not tough for them to do. But I've got to find some chunks of wood to even out this spindle because it's got all kinds of different angles and heights and stuff on it. And I'll press the bearing out, and then I will press the new one in and show you once it's all done. Pressing the new one in, obviously I'll flip it over and push the new one in from the top, using the old one to push it down with. Yeah. Back in a sec. Okay, so old bearing. This and a combination of other crap, another Volkswagen bearing, I believe. See, it's slightly smaller than this one, and some other junk I used to manage to pry it out, pop it out finally. It wasn't pretty, but it happened. I just, like I said, I need more spacers and different size. I don't do this every day, so I don't have all those different size pieces of metal to stack under anything. And now this is the end it came out. This is the end the spring was on, the C-clip is on. So this is the end the bearing is going to push in. So I'm just going to put this back on the press. I'm going to put the new bearing in there. I'm going to then push it down until it seats against the bottom. There's a lip on the bottom. And to get it seated, you just basically push it down. You can tap this in. You can use a hammer to do this. Don't ever hammer on the bearing itself. Put the new bearing in, place it in, use a piece of wood on top and then tap it in. And then once it's going, use the old bearing, which you've already tapped out, and it's the exact same size, so you'll fit it on the outside because you always want to pound on the metal part. You never want to hit on the inside, and you never want to hit on the inside metal part, just the outer metal part, and you'll push it back in. And again, you can do that with a hammer. I'm not going to do it with a hammer because that's why I bought the damn thing, so I wouldn't have to do it with a hammer. So I'm going to press that bearing in and be back in a second. Again, your easiest option for anyone at home, if you don't have this stuff, is, plan that you're going to do this and take it to a shop. Again, they can do this for you in 10 minutes. They can press the old bearing out, press the new bearing in, press your spindle, your hub in, all done. You just bring it back in and bolt it up. The other part where we showed pushing the hub out, they can do that as well. So just take the whole thing to them with the new bearing and they'll have it done in 15 minutes. And probably 20 bucks, and it's probably the best 20 bucks you ever spent. Saves you like 2 hours. If you're still soldiering along at home and haven't taken this to a shop, God bless your fortitude. Anyway, I've pressed the bearing, the new bearing, as far in as I can. Not as I can, actually. I could push it all the way in, but I just wanted to show you what you would have to do if you weren't using a bearing press. Once you got it pushed in, you take the old bearing, match it up dead on with the new one, and tap it in. And it's going to go straight in, and the metal part is going to exactly connect with the metal part on the bearing, so it's the perfect size. And you will hear a different sound once the bearing is seated. You'll hear a different sound than you're hearing now. Once I'm tapping, you'll hear it. Almost. Okay. You can hear that stiffer. It's hard to explain. It's a stiffer sound than just tapping on it. So I'm going to clean up that spring clip, that C-clip, with sandpaper and make it nice and back to its normal size. Take all the rust off, and then we'll pop it in there, and we'll be ready to put this whole sucker back on once we press the center hub back in. Spring clip all cleaned up, and I'm going to use needle nose to put it in, even though I don't want to. They just don't grip the holes as well, but they will grip. Yeah. I just don't want to slip and pierce the rubber dust cover on the bearing. And these are larger. I'm going to get a smaller pair. Just wanted a smaller tip on them because I don't want them to slip out and, again, puncture that bearing boot. That would completely destroy everything I just did. So, yeah, that wouldn't be fun. Come on. Now that it's out, it's too wide for the nose of these smaller vice grip. Oh, maybe not. These needle nose. Okay, screw it. I'm going to just use the right tool because I don't want to pierce the rubber cover there. So, my apologies. These are about 10 bucks a piece for the spring clip pliers. And in she goes. And you can see how much easier the real tool worked. Again, the other one will work, but for 10 bucks, if you're going to be doing this, get them. Anyway, now we got to press the hub in, so I'll be back in 1 second. Okay, so I've tapped the hub slightly into the center, and what I want to do with the press, and if I'm tapping it in, if you're hammering it in, you want to support it with the old bearing center. You want to support the center of the new bearing. You're going to support it from the back, and then maybe put another piece of metal on it, sit that on the ground, and then you can tap the hub into there. I'm going to press the hub into there, but I'm going to use that as a stand to stand on top, for it to stand on and sit there, so that you're putting, if you didn't have this in there, you'd be forcing this new hub past the two-part bearing race, which will push the bottom out. You saw the one that came off when we took the old hub out. That'll just do the same thing. It'll just repeat the same thing with your new bearing, and whoops, got to start all over again. So you want to support this on this side from the back as you're pushing the hub assembly through. So I'm going to balance this all up on the press and be back. Okay, so I basically got it balanced on that little pedestal with the old bearing in the middle, supporting the new bearing middle. And I'm just going to press up and in. Just a tiny little bit of penetrant to make sure it slides in easier. Still centered, which it is mostly. A little bit off center, I don't like that. It. She is in. There goes my little platform. And the new bearing is in. Okay, and we're ready to reverse all the steps and go back in. First, second, so bottom first, up and in, bolt on. This one second, third for the tie rod end, and then put all the brakes back on. I'll be back to do the torque spec on everything, and otherwise we're just reversing this. This has already taken me 5 hours to film. I would have been done in 2, but filming makes everything a heck of a lot longer. Okay, I waited for a few hours to cool down because it was just too damn roasty out here. Killing myself. Anyway, a bit of grease on the face of the axle shaft where it's going to go through to keep, to allow it to move against the bearing face and keep water from getting in. Torque specs: about 60 foot-pounds for the lower ball joint nut. Upper is about 40. Tie rod end also about 40. About 30 for the 2 bolts holding the caliper bracket in, and everything else are tiny little bolts, so just hand tight. They're not holding anything in, like the wheel speed sensor and everything else. They're like 8 foot-pounds or something like that. And the center axle nut, we'll come back to that when I get ready to do that, which will be about 5 minutes from here. But I'm going to put all those back on, torque them, and then we'll go to the center axle nut, which is the toughie. Things backed on and torqued up, and I put the center nut, I'd say it's around 250, 300 foot-pounds with my impact gun, but it's supposed to be 360 according to the factory specs. 360 foot-pounds is a lot. I do not have a torque wrench that goes up to 360 foot-pounds. Mine goes up to 250. So most people probably don't have one. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the wheel back on with the center cap out. Make sure you push the center cap out before you put the wheel on, because you'd have to just dig at it with a pick or something to get it out. Just pop it out from the back. We're going to put the wheel back down, put it on the ground, and then we're going to torque it like barbarians. Back in a sec. Okay, so we pulled the jack out, wheels on the ground now, and we are just going to take our 3-foot cheater bar and jump on it. That'll give us approximately our 490 Newton meter or 360 foot-pound torque. Approximately. Shoot me for not having a 360-pound torque wrench. I'm doubting I'm going to get much after using my impact gun on it. It probably went up to about 400. I said it's tragedy. Okay, I'm about 205 pounds, so that's about 360. Hey, I made up the math. I invented it, okay? But on the end of a 3-foot cheater bar, jumping up and down, yeah, that's probably about 350. It's damn well tight enough, that's all I know. Anyway, thank you very much for watching and enduring this with me. If you like this stuff, please subscribe, like, comment, call me names, doesn't matter. I don't care, just any type of interaction. I'm like a dog that wants to be beat. Just give me some goddamn attention. Thank you very much for watching.